Hello and welcome to the Ultrawizard Ramble podcast. I'm Patrick Reagan, your host, and this is episode number 5. Today I'm going to have a chance to chat with a good friend of mine, Kris Bob Brown from Missoula, Montana. Kris is a pro runner for Hoka, Rabbit. He runs for Dry Max Socks. He lives in Missoula, Montana now with his partner Kat, where they have a couple cats and a beautiful little spot in downtown. Kris is a top 10 finisher at the Western States 100 and has been a person that's influenced me heavily like throughout my whole running career since I've had a chance to meet Kris and get to know him. I feel like he runs for all the right reasons, and I hope you enjoy our conversation today. All right, the second time he's been on the show. Welcome back, Kris Bob.
Yeah, baby.
Brown.
Oh,
yeah, baby.
Dude, sick Yob shirt, by the way.
Yeah, me and Christian Mosley, his partner Abby, we went to see him in Atlanta, and it was something special. It was like 3 songs to go, man, and the singer said, "All right, here's the deal. We have 3 more songs. We think this is an appropriately long set.
That's 50 minutes.
Look, you've got 35 more minutes, and we don't encore. So don't even try it, And it was like, I really respected it. It felt like this craft, like there was something super cool about the way that Yob did that show. Like presentation, drum mics like 12 feet in the air, man, because he knew how hard he was going to be hitting those things. It was something special, man.
Dude, I have an experience with Yob that, I've had similar experiences with a lot of post rock and metal bands where like, there's something about that particular type of music that goes really well with the great outdoors, as they say. I was in this it's not, I was going to say little town, but it's an ancient city in Myanmar, Burma, called Bagan. And it's basically like the Angkor Wat of Myanmar, but not, not to be hipster about it, but not as well known, right? Because like Myanmar is only intermittently open to visitors. So I happened to hit it when it was open and not doing genocide and stuff. But there's basically this town full of like thousands and thousands of these temples that were built in a range of time that includes like the 1200s. So super cool, really interesting architectural style, if you can even call it that. But it was abandoned, right? So they basically built this whole city. It was like a holy city. So, cause it's, all temples. And then they had basically finished it, and then they got word that Genghis Khan was coming, and they just fucking left.
Oh man, what a bummer!
So they had this whole big project to build this new and holy city, and then they just had to bail immediately and flee to other parts of Southeast Asia. And that's History Corner with Kris, and I guarantee the factual accuracy of everything I just said.
Yeah, I can second and guarantee it. I mean, there's no reason to Google any of that because it's got to be 100% accurate. Like to the day, they finished on the day, and then next thing we knew, Genghis Khan was rolling into town.
Yeah. So I'm on a. Let me finish the story, Pat. So I'm on a little electric scooter riding around, and it's sunset, and there's all these temples, and it's the desert, and it's sweet, and I'm just playing Yob, and I just cannot get my hand off the accelerator. I'm just flying, going like 32 miles an hour on an electric scooter, cruising through the desert, and it was a moment, and I've always loved Yob since then.
There's something really special about like the way they start the show and the way they kind of thank the audience prior to the show. It feels super Eastern to me. I don't know what it is about like the way they interact, but there's a definite like spirituality to their show. And, it's kind of neat, man. Like the singer and lead guitarist, he sort of acknowledges you and wants you to be like part of his experience that night too. He's thanking you as much as he's presenting this like beautiful piece of art to you. To me, it was a really cool experience. The way he interacted, like with his mic too. I don't know how much you saw of it from like the angles you've seen those guys play at, man. But like when he's doing the more melodic parts, he's dead on the mic. And then when he's doing like deeper growly stuff, he's like way over here. So I don't know what sort of mic he has, but it's pretty cool.
We could learn about podcasting a little bit from that guy, Get
Yeah,
different
probably.
voices into different sides of the mic.
Yeah, we should go over here. I don't know.
I'm over here, man.
Over here, man. I don't know what the effect is, but when I first heard the band, I think what I was most intrigued about was I thought there were multiple singers. You know,
Oh, really?
it. Yeah, it was. It's really interesting the way the dude does it all. To me,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's kind of a signature of metal bands in general, is, or at least ones that do screaming and growling vocals, is there's a way. The way I've always thought about growling vocals, at least once I started to be able to tolerate them, was it's basically like doing harmonics, right? Like on a guitar, when you're tuning your guitar, you use harmonics by I don't know how to exactly describe it, but hitting the metal bar in between the frets, and you hit it lightly, and you make a sound that's not exactly the same as actually hitting the string, and there's a way you can do that to tune the guitar. So it's almost using like an anti-note, and I feel like they're doing with that with their voice to a certain extent. It's
yeah, I
similar
can
to
see
like
that.
Mongolian throat singing, for example. It's like you there's a way you can push air through your vocal cords to do resonance in a different way. So I do feel like, yeah, a lot of metal bands that do screaming and growling vocals sometimes sound like multiple singers, because they basically have two different voices.
Yeah, especially the way that that's a great analogy. I think like fretting on the metal as opposed to fretting on the wood is going to give you a totally different effect and sound, especially if you move the fingertip in like a vibrato fashion of some sort. I love those harmonics and the way it sounds. I mean, it's metal on metal as opposed to wood on metal. So of
Yeah,
course you're going to get a totally different sound out of it, especially with acoustic instruments to me. Like I think it's very noticeable with like resonator guitars, etc.
dude, there's this great YouTube video. I think it's pretty easy to find if you just type in death metal vocal exercises, and it's kind of a joke, but I actually found it kind of informative. It's this dude. He's a metal singer he's doing warm-ups for a show, so he's doing like a vocal warm-up exercise, and so he's like playing do re mi on a piano, like as if he's tuning his voice to the piano, but he's
Oh,
doing growling vocals. And it's
whoa.
exactly what I'm talking about. It's like, yeah, he's hitting a C on the piano, but he's going, oh. But for some reason,
Awesome.
like he's moving up the scale on the piano, and he's doing different things with his voice, and it sounds like, you watch it and you're like, okay, this is fucking, it's a joke video, but it actually makes sense in a weird way when you listen to it. So I don't know, those guys are wild. And I've never seen Yob, by the way.
Oh, you haven't seen him. Okay.
No, I've been wanting to for a long time, but it's never lined up.
Yeah, I think did they play in Missoula this summer or did they play maybe in Bozeman? There was this cool festival out in Bozeman. I think that was a lot of those kind of like woodland, grungy, slow, sludgy metal bands, and it looked like it was on a farm. I thought it was up your way.
I
Like
don't
Kris,
know.
I was like, this isn't the kind of thing that Kris would miss. But then again, you travel a lot for work, so
Yeah, I'm out of town for a lot, but I also feel like, I mean, Missoula, I've been proven wrong a little bit this year. Typically, we don't get great shows. There's a few per year. It's a lot of like kind of B tier musicians, and a lot of times I like that, but for the most part, it just doesn't line up with my taste. So I haven't seen a lot of shows here yet. But um, yeah, I mean, Death Heaven is coming this fall, and I'm going to be out of town for it, so I can't go. But I was all butthurt about that, and it was like, there's like a wedding I'm going to, and then immediately into working a race, like the weekend after. I was like, well, maybe if I fly back, I can be home for like 18 hours and catch that show. But it's like, dude, I've seen them twice. I can't be fucking around with my schedule to that extent to fly, you know.
well, we also saw them at such a special show, man, down in Phoenix too. Like me and you and Josh being able to see them um, with Midwife opening up and
And Holy
Flowing
Fawn.
Raiden and Holy Fawn was
What
like,
were you about to say? Flowing Raiden?
no, 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 no.
Flowing right
Oh,
in? What do you?
yeah,
I was like, what fucking band are you talking
yeah,
about?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then they were flowing right into Holy Fawn, right? It was like Midwife, Holy
Yeah,
Fawn, and then Deaf Heaven. And
yeah.
there was some, yeah. So, all right, we can go music for the rest of the cast, but today is like your first time on the cast outside of the intro, and I want to give people a little bit of a background story on you just as an athlete. I mean, now you're primarily doing your professional running. You work for Spartan. Um, you've got a background in the restaurant industry, and you've got a plethora of different experiences with ultra running, man. So tell me more about your origin story a little bit, just in terms of ultra running, man. I'm kind of stoked for the audience in general to just hear, where you come from, going all the way back to Seattle.
Sure, man. Yeah, it's pretty traditional, which I guess is in itself kind of non-traditional as far as ultra running goes. Although you're starting to see more and more people like this, and I think you have a similar background, which is I started super young. I ran in high school, but I also ran a lot earlier too. I've been running distance since I was like maybe 7 or 8 years old. Cross country as early as maybe 9. It's cool because I have like those shirts that you get from like camps and other sorts of events when you're little that have all the names of the participants on the back. I have
Oh,
some
sure,
of
sure.
those from like 99 and 2000 and stuff with like these national cross country meets that I ran. And there's, 500 names on the back. And every once in a while I'll go back through them and it's like, oh, I didn't know Galen Rupp was in that meet with me. Or,
So cool. Yeah, you're
yeah,
up in that Pacific Northwest area, right? Where
yeah, totally.
all
But
these
also,
athletes.
I'll see, I keep revisiting them because the longer I'm in the sport and the more people I meet, the more I recognize names that aren't just famous people, but actual people who I come into contact with and then become friends with later in life. So, like Cole Watson, I found on a couple shirts recently. I was like, dude, not only is he still running, but it's kind of cool that we were in the same place at the same time so long ago. So yeah, I did that kind of running the USATF stuff for kids when I was little, and then kind of straight into high school running and college running. And neither, I don't want to speak too ill of the programs because it's not like I was personally too good for them or anything, but my high school was not a distance running program by any means. So I got a couple of school
Gotcha.
records there that were not particularly impressive, but it was just, it was like it was, I think at that point we still had like the long jump and a couple of the hurdles state records. And it was just not, but it was just not a distance running school. It wasn't our thing. So I was kind of going solo there, which honestly kind of set the tone because as the one kid who had the distance running hobby, as a young kid, I was already kind of a little bit of a weirdo for that. And then that doing it in high school and being part of a school that didn't really care about it, it just kind of furthered that um, side of it in terms of me going it alone and having to have my own reasons for it. So I've always carried that with me since then. And to some extent that continued through college. So I went to a D3 school and yada, 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 did that and got out the other side and eventually made my way to ultra running. I think you're on mute there, buddy.
Had a pretty good experience there too, right? Just in terms of you had an interesting coaching relationship. Like, was your coach originally a distance runner or originally a thrower there?
Yeah, my coach was a hammer thrower, and I always thought that he was he was supposed to be on the 1980 Olympic team, which that was the year that we didn't go as the United States because we were boycotting that it was Cold War and we protested because it was in Russia and I think Russia had just invaded Afghanistan or whatever the deal was. But so yeah, we didn't go that year. So my coach didn't go to the Olympics. But I recently realized like, hey, that's probably Googleable. So just to like fact check myself before continuing to tell this story to everyone. And I'm pretty sure he didn't make that team. I think he like threw
Oh
at the
man.
trials. Yeah, he like threw at the trials, but like was not one of the top three.
So he may have said like to you guys that he was on track to make the team, but that wasn't the actual scenario.
Something like that. Yeah, I don't know, but he was back. That's back in like the golden era of steroids and you know dog food eating and like just absolutely crazy reckless dudes throwing weight around. So he was an animal, that's for sure. I think he knew a lot about athletic performance, but he was obviously not a distance runner. So, but it was a cool relationship. He always really reminded me of my idea of what Bowerman was like, which is this sort of
Interesting. Yeah, yeah.
super old school, highly inappropriate. Like he would, it's hard to describe anything he did while also like making sure that everyone realizes that it was all in good fun. So I'll just hold off on the stories, but he was a wild dude, but there was a lot of love, and I pretty much everyone who went through that program got it out, got that sense, even though he was a hard ass.
So what's that transition like for you, man? You're flowing from, collegiate running eventually into ultra running here, and you skipped some of the progression there with like you didn't really go to the half marathon as a specialty, right? You wanted to do trail running specifically.
Yeah, well, there's kind of two sides to that. The first side is I when I got out of college, I did assume that my best days were ahead of me. Every season in college, I would finish slower than I started, and I blamed the style of the program. I didn't necessarily think it was a bad program, but I thought it didn't suit me for whatever reason. So I figured, hey, it's going to be like an extended summer now, and summers are what gets me fit. So I am gonna just continue to run on my own terms, and I'll probably set a PR in the 5K and the 10K, eventually move on to the marathon. And that didn't fucking happen because training without a group and outside of the collegiate settings, super hard and
super difficult, right? Especially for those particular disciplines, like those distances. It's not virtually impossible. I just find it really difficult to prepare for a 5K or a 10K without a group.
So I lost close to a minute on my 5K within a year and a half or 2 years and pretty much gave up on it. Now, that's part of the story, but the other side of it is ultra running had always been in the cards for me. It had always been the plan. And that's because from a really young age, I've been introduced to it. My dad was a runner. He wasn't an ultra runner, but we always had Scott Jurek to look up to in Seattle. He was like, Washington State's answer to Prefontaine. Like our celebrity runner in the late 90s and early 2000s was Jurek. So, have I told you my school newspaper, Scott Jurek, embarrassing story?
Oh no, let's do it though. Yeah.
All right. So I was again not a distance running school. So I made it to state as an individual in cross country my senior year, and as a result, the school newspaper did a little article on me. And as part of that article, they asked, "What runner do I look up to the most?" Or I think actually the question was, if you could go on a run with anybody, who would it be? And my answer was Jurek. And so that was published. My dad took a copy of the newspaper and I think like scanned it and emailed it to Jurek and asked if Scott would go on a run with me. We lived in the same city, so it wasn't like a huge ask, but
oh man.
Yeah. So cool. My dad did this without telling me. So he emails Jurek and asks him to go on a run with his son. And then Jurek said yes. Again, I don't know anything about this yet. And so my dad prints out this email and gives it to me and shows me this whole exchange between him and Scott Jurek, where Jurek agrees to go on a run with me. And dude, I was 17. So I was so embarrassed and immature about it and thought it was just like the most, embarrassing and potentially awkward thing that I could ever put myself through. So I turned him down flat out. I was like, no, I didn't even say thank you. I was like, dude, no, I can't do that.
To your dad? This is your
to my dad.
With your dad, Okay.
So
okay.
I told my dad, I wouldn't do it. And so the whole thing backfired on him. And
oh man,
which is incredible. Just like, what a teenager thing to do. It's like, it would have been fine. I mean, honestly.
Oh, dude, you would have had so much fun. You would have probably like started running ultras in college or something, man. Well, we'll get to that, but you would have probably like went down the path a lot sooner even, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. But yeah, I don't know. It's just, what a teenage thing to do, to think that that's not a good idea.
So here's a question. Scott, at this stage, like What year is this? This is like midway through him winning Western States over and over again.
That was actually right at the end of the run, so that would have been fall 2006. So he had just won his last one. This is like just post Brian Morrison.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think you would have been like somewhat surprised at like Scott's leg speed at that time? Like I kind of wonder what the run would have been like. Like, would you have been pushing to keep up with Scott? Would Scott have been like pushing to keep up with you? Like, you're totally different athletes at that point too, you know?
I mean, I think I at a certain level, an easy run's an easy run. Yeah, I don't think it would have been
Sure.
a struggle for either of us to keep up with the other. Because on the one hand, I mean, he's a pro runner, but he's also an ultra runner, and I know what I know now, and we're pretty slow on the easy runs. And
True.
as a 17-year-old, I probably had some pop in the step that I don't anymore. So I think it would have been fine.
Yeah, what a funny story though, man, that your dad reached out to basically your current hero from the Pacific Northwest, this dude that's like an icon in your area,
Yeah,
winning Western States over and over again.
yeah.
And you say, "Nah, man, I'm not doing that."
No, I don't
That's
want.
super
I don't.
embarrassing.
I don't want
I
to.
don't want to do that.
I
That's
don't want to
wild.
beat you, bro. No. So yeah.
Did you ever ask your dad how he covered your tracks? Like, this would be the kind of thing that I bet you Jurek would laugh about this. Like, have you ever mentioned this to him, like at Western States, or seen him there or anything like that?
No, I've meant to. I've met Scott a couple times, but it's always been really in passing and in groups, so I didn't really have the opportunity to tell a story. I did weirdly at States this year. I told this story to Tim Tweetmeyer just because I was drunk and he was there. So Tim Tweet knows the story now, but yeah.
Oh
So,
man,
dude,
that's awesome.
we had
That's
a
right.
we had a night at the Dubliner this year, and it was
Oh, this was with Luis. I saw you the next day, and you didn't look great.
I didn't look great. I didn't feel great, but it was worth it, man. Because if you can sit around drinking JMO with some legends, not only of the Western States but also of the Tevis Cup, you take that seat and you drink that JMO.
Very cool, man. All right, so we're skipping past your high school years of running, cross country, college, running cross country, and you find yourself like out in the world after college. And when do you begin to explore the path of ultra running? Where are you? Are you in Santa Barbara at that point? Yeah.
So I ran one ultra when I was in college. I was going abroad spring semester of junior year, so there was kind of no stakes. Any coach worth their salt would discourage an active collegiate athlete from doing an ultra, just for
Yeah, sure.
the sake of preventing injuries. And mine certainly was no different. But with a whole spring semester to just with not being on the team and just to be able to do my own running, the stakes were low. So I went out in December. So right after cross country season, I went out and did a 50K. It went pretty well. So there was an inkling there. And I ran it with my friend Brian, who also has done a bunch of ultras at this point. He was a collegiate teammate / rival, which is a weird feature of the Claremont colleges that are kind of
Yeah,
old
this is
school.
Gillis,
And
right?
this is Gillis, yeah. So we did that race together. We did some long runs together, training for it, and then I took like 6 years off, and then came back and did Way Too Cool. Came back and did Lake Sonoma, and but I think one of the catalysts, like again, I always thought I wanted to do it, and they were always interesting to me. But one of the catalysts was running against a guy like Brian, who by no means is bad at ultras, but he and I were really similar at all the shorter distances. We would always be pretty close to each other in track meets and cross country, and we're pretty reliably similar runners. And we started doing these
Gotcha.
super long runs and a couple of races together, and we'd be running together for a long time. And then in the last maybe third of it, I would just smoke him. And
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, and so I just started to get this kind of realization that, oh, maybe there's something about me as a runner that I was never able to find out before, which is this in this ultra style endurance where it's not about being an aerobic monster. It's about just lack of breakdown and continuity of metabolism way past the duration of those shorter distances. So I basically figured out that I had the X factor. And I figured that out by running a few ultras with someone whose ability I knew was basically identical to mine at the shorter stuff.
Which is a cool way to measure yourself. I found that pretty early on as well, Kris, with facing off against marathoners in different road ultras that I knew had absurd PBs, but we would hit 40 miles, close to 50 miles on the way to the 100K, and I'd be still in the game catching those runners and gapping them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I knew at that point, having run road marathons, well, wait, why am I beating a 206 or 208 or 210 marathoner, right? At an event like Comrades, like I need to keep exploring this path, right? And I think that was kind of the moment for me, similar to you, where I wasn't necessarily racing and early on in ultras like guys that had beat me in college, but you could do the math as a coach, right? There's no reason a 220 marathoner should beat a 210 marathoner unless you have that X factor. So
Yeah,
it's pretty cool to see that aha moment,
Yeah, there's a flip side to that though, which is obviously figuring out that you're relatively good at something is a good way to get motivated to start pursuing it seriously. What happens when that's not the case anymore? Like we're going to have to reckon with this if we haven't started already, man. Like what happens when you start going down the other side? Like, do you have it in the bank? Like, do you have enough additional motivations for doing the thing to keep you going without, I guess, questioning yourself or ceasing to have a good time doing it?
Well, sure. I mean, I think at different stages in the past few years, both of us have been there. I've worked through some patches, definitely. I know you've worked through some patches, and we're not going to get faster at this point.
Yeah.
And the question there is, well, eventually, right? Do I want to run a 29-hour 100? And that's hopefully very far down the line.
Yeah.
But that is a question you need to face. Like, how much does the ultra running community and being involved in this really mean to you? Do you want to still be doing that? Or would you rather, be on a bike, doing some bike packing, or just enjoying a couple hours a day on a gravel bicycle and 4 or 5 runs a week, right? So I don't know how you face that as an athlete. It's interesting. I feel like talked a good game early on that, oh yeah, I'll be a lifer in this. And I think things change over time, that's not necessarily the case for every runner.
Yeah, I've talked a big game about it too. And, but yeah, I feel like, I'm 34. Like I can't really make an argument for being over the hill. Sometimes I feel like it. And I think a lot of that is just like when you're early in the first few years of training seriously, you progress so rapidly.
Right.
That progress comes a little more easily. And so I certainly don't think by any means mathematically and chronologically, I am definitely past my PRs at any distance really. But yeah, I mean, you look at Courtney, right? She's 39 and she's beating the hell out of us. So,
sure is, man. Sure
yeah,
is.
but I am starting to kind of ponder the mortality in that sense. We should talk to somebody who's kind of still, or who's still doing it in a really serious sense, despite having had a lot more success early in the career, but falling off as time has reclaimed them. How about Megan, right? There's Megan Canfield, like absolute legend of the sport, still a legend of the sport. Like there's no way she can ever run as fast as she did, but she's still hammering. Like how is her relationship with it at this point?
Yeah, and I think about Hal Kerner's still in the sport, still running all the distances slower, right? And that's just a natural thing. As we age in life, we're going to, a Western States champion or someone like Megan that was runner up, someone like Hal that has won the race, they love the sport and they still want to be in it, right? It's interesting. Like, how do you keep going in that way?
Yeah. When people ask like what your motivation for running is, trying to get out of you, whether it's purely sort of as a sole runner or whether it's purely competitive, the question always bothered me because I feel like anyone who's done it seriously for any period of time for any of those people, the answer has to be all of it. Because
Well,
none of
yeah,
them on their
of
own.
course, it's all of it. It's does it give you the mental health benefit, like at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Do you sleep better because of it? Do you eat better because of it? Do you move through life in a more patient way? Like I think there is a soul side to it, but there's also a competitive side to it. I mean, I know for me, man, it feels really good to win races, you know? Like
Yeah.
I love the feeling of winning races. I love the feeling of winning races a lot more than battling through races and barely being top 10, right? Like
Yeah.
it feels a lot better to come out on the side of the equation that where you win the event. And I think I'll always want to go out the door and run, but at what point do like I stop competing, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm like 22 years into my running career, right? Like from the time I ran in high school to now. That's a long time. That's a long time to spend running to do this thing. Do you eventually stop competing? Like where's the D-Day on that?
Yeah. I feel like, if the end game for both of us is to continue, is to be one of the 75-year-olds doing Western States, it's like, wouldn't it be easier to get there if the goal the whole time was just finish, you know, rather than having
Right.
been in the top 10 early and then falling off slowly year after year? Like, I feel like that's a mentally harder road to being that 75-year-old. So, yeah, my friend just rolled through my yard on her bike, and 30 seconds later, I went out the back door and she was not there. So I think something must have happened to her.
Yeah, so you've got this community sauna in the backyard.
Yeah.
Did Peterman use this for his Western States win? Is this
Oh
a
yeah,
Western
baby.
States winter sauna?
This is the Western States winter sauna, dude.
Wow.
We cook out there. Yeah, I think
Yeah, you guys cook out there.
big time. Yeah, we spend a lot of. I mean, it's kind of seasonal. Like whenever one of us or a group of us is getting ready for a big race, um, we kind of spend a few weeks really going at it several times a week. But
Yeah.
yeah, so a bunch of us are going over to Sham this year for UTMB races. So there's kind of a crew that's been coming over and schwitzing.
Yeah, so you get top 10 at Western States. You make your way into the event. You find yourself at mile 50. It's like your dream race, right?
Mm-hmm.
States at that point. Walk me through like what it was like to be in that race after like having grown up, loving ultra running in the way that you did, man. Interesting to know about ultra running, love ultra running your whole track, your whole way through. I know a couple good stories of you not knowing you were top 10 at Western States.
Oh, that was
What was that
brutal.
last 50 like, man?
Yeah, so the road there it's weird because it was like 20 years long in terms of how long I knew I was gonna do Western States before I got there, but it
Mm-hmm.
was only a year long in the having top 10 as a goal thing. So I went the year before.
Okay.
I mean, I always had wanted to do the race. I had really um, no illusion of being competitive there, and so, but I went to spectate, and I had just won the San Diego 100. So I'd had a successful outing at a 100-miler a couple weeks before. I was starting to get the inclination or the idea that I might be kind of good at this. This was before I ran the North Face 50 and kind of had a breakout race there, but I was starting to feel like I was a pretty fast runner.
Sure.
So I'm at States in 2017, and I just remember being at the river and watching
17 or 18?
17. The year that I was spectating was 17. So I was watching that year, and I
Yeah.
just remember watching number 10 go by at the river and just thinking, I will be that guy. And I
That's
put it in
awesome.
my brain at that moment and just spent a year working towards it. And I wasn't in the race yet for the following year. It'd take another 6 months for the lottery to happen. And then I got in on the lottery. So it all started lining up. But I did have that moment in 2017 where I really just decided that it was big goal of mine to be 10th. And sure enough, a year later. But in terms
Zach
of the
Bitter
actual,
picks your ticket in the lottery.
oh yeah,
Right?
so that's the brutal part is Zach Bitter. This is when the race was sponsored by Ultra. Zach Bitter was a celebrity picker. They bring him up to pull names out of the proverbial hat. And Zach picked my name, which put me in the race. He was also in the race, and I took 10th and he took 11th. So, man, what a bad pick.
Man, what a bad pick.
Yeah, it
could
was
have been
awesome.
could have been anybody, Zach. Yeah. I love that part of the story.
Yeah.
So you're at the river. You find yourself there a year later, 2018. What place are you in?
I don't remember, but I did. I ran a pretty classic old school race, a la Sharman, Browning, Haynes, and those were the guys I was really emulating. I'm not sure that type of race is totally out of the question anymore, but the last few years there's been a pattern of that style of race not working out anymore. So I was in the mid to upper teens all day, maybe even into the low 20s in the early stages. And I just kind of picked my way through the ranks all day. By the river, I was in probably, I don't know, 13th or something. Yeah, but someone told, I mean, everyone tells you the race starts at Forest Hill. And so I really internalized that and then completely blew up on Cal Street. So don't believe those folks. So I basically, I got about halfway through Cal Street and really started to fall apart. So maybe mile 70 or something. And by the river, I was a ghost. I'd been real happy and communicative and lucid all day. And then I got to the river and was just gone. Like I had the 1,000-yard stare. I wasn't really able to manage my nutrition strategy. Like I didn't know what to grab, what to drop. I was gone. But that from like from a execution standpoint, in like the sort of brutal sense, like that race is maybe my proudest moment because I just, from there to the finish, I didn't have a single good moment. I just fought. It was just an absolute slugfest. And the splits weren't great. Like you look at them compared to other times historically along that section. And I counted on a lot of carnage. But I realistically should have been the carnage. But that's one of those races. Like I don't believe in, I mean, mind over matter is, I mean, it's a real thing, but it's not a like repeatable, sustainable sort of strategy, right? Like occasionally you get one of those, but you can't rely on racing like that. Like you need to have good nutrition and feel good rather than like feeling bad and gutting through it. It doesn't work out almost ever. But that day, yeah, I just from the river to the finish, it was just an absolute slugfest, and I ended up passing Tim Frericks for 10th. Well, actually, right before that at Pointed Rocks, I ran into Kira Henninger, who, not to be confused with Keely, but Kira is the wife of Jesse Haynes, who had been one of my icons, and she's a race director in Southern California of high esteem. I knew her from a couple races there. So I roll into Pointed Rocks and I see Kira, who's a race director I know from doing some SoCal races. And I asked her, because Jesse was in the race that year, so I started asking her how Jesse was doing, and I was just fully distracted. Like I had checked out, my brain was off.
Oh, man.
I was just like runner's high and no brain. And so I was like, "Oh, Kira, good to see you." And she just grabbed me and was like, "Dude, 10th is right there. Get out of here." And just snapped me back to reality. So I just kept cruising along at my 12-minute miles, and pretty quickly thereafter passed Tim Frericks, who was totally spent. And by my count, I was still 11th at that point, and I was pretty hopeless that anyone was still there in front of me. So, but I was still fighting in the same way that I did with Rod this year. Rod Farvard, I was pacing him, and at pretty far from the finish, we knew that 10th wasn't going to happen, but we fought and fought and fought and took 11th, and that's something to be proud of.
Sure.
So I did that basically. And in hindsight, it's like, there were a lot of people, a lot of trustworthy people with all the information telling me I was in 10th. But by my fucked up math, I wasn't. I was in 11th. And I just wasn't hearing things at that point. So, it was just a slugfest, and we battled and got to the finish. And I didn't even hear Tropical John over the intercom say that I was 10th. I crossed the line and still
Oh
thought
man.
I was 11th.
Yeah.
I just
You're
couldn't.
11th. Yeah.
I couldn't get it through. Like nothing was going in my brain. And then someone after told me I was 10th. And
yeah.
But at that point, it's like I didn't have any more brain chemicals. Like I didn't have any serotonin left. So someone told me I was 10th, and it was a sure thing. And I was like, oh, okay. Like whatever, dude. I'm still gonna die. Like doesn't matter.
I still feel awful. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make me want to come back here next year. In the state I'm in right now, I feel awful. I've felt awful for 30 miles. That doesn't help. It's like, it's not like, I'll be back next year. Like I got to think about this for a little bit, right?
No, there wasn't. It was just there was no emotions left, good or bad. It was only pain.
Was it a different experience than the year after we got to race together?
Yeah, the year after was a much more pleasant and much less meaningful experience, because so much went into becoming 10th there, and then the accomplishment of that was eventually such a cathartic thing that honestly to this day I've had a hard time getting as psyched for anything as I was for that race.
Whoa.
And the next year especially, all the pressure was off, because not only had I achieved 10th, and let's face it, I wasn't going to win, and I pretty much for sure wasn't going to be podium. So it's like, okay, so if I have an even better race, like maybe I get like 7th, like who cares? Not who cares, but who cares? But in addition to that, I had a lot
once you've done it. Once you've already done it, then the allure is maybe worn off for you a little.
Yeah. But an even bigger part of it was I had to take a lot of the pressure off of that race, because a lot of life stuff came up. I ended up opening a restaurant that year about 3 months before States 2019. So, I was working from about 9 a.m. to 2 a.m. every day for months. Running was reduced to like maybe an hour on the boardwalk, on the beach in Santa Barbara, like maybe 4 or 5 days a week, for like months. So I had almost no training. Atrophy takes a long time, and a lot can be said for residual fitness and being fresh. But still, the training was not even remotely similar to where it was in 2018, nor was the mental state. So I thought of that whole year as basically a nice victory lap, and that's what it was. And I ended up running a lot faster, and I think kind of that muscle memory that you get with doing more hundreds really played a factor there. But so I ran 45 minutes faster, a lot of which was because of the weather, and ended up finishing 3 places worse. So it's 2019 was the year that the sport exploded, as far as I'm concerned.
Kind of a wild race to be in, and kind of a wild race to watch this year with similar weather conditions. I would call it similar. Probably, a lot less shade, right? And that's because of the Mosquito Ridge fire now. Like the western states we saw this year is very different. Not having that 14, 15, 16, 17 miles of shade is really important. So I think the times from this year in the 2019 race would have been 10 or 15 minutes faster just because of that shade. What are your thoughts?
I'm torn on that, because, on the one hand, shade in 2019 helped. But on the other hand, one of the most trying conditions of the canyons is the still air caused by all the foliage. So when you're in that canyon, below the ridge line, near the river, in all those trees, like, first of all, I think vegetation adds a lot of humidity. And also it slows I don't know if there was any air moving through those canyons there this year with, reduced vegetation, but historically that's the feeling that you get when you're down there, is like it's 110. There's humidity because of all the shrubs, and the air is not moving at all, also because of the shrubs. So again, I don't really know how it felt this year. But it's kind of a trade-off whether those conditions or a little more sun is worse. So the other big factor this year was the high country. I know there was plenty of snow in 2019 when we went through, but I feel like this year's conditions were way worse.
Way worse, man. When we did that first 4 miles, me and you and Cody and Sarah, I was like stunned by how much we were post-holing.
Yeah, I owe Corinne and Andy Cochran and I think Tom, just by sort of transitivity, dinner, because I was running around the village betting anyone who would take it that no one was going to break 15, despite all these, I still think in hindsight, insane predictions that, like, I don't know, people were yapping about like 5 or even 10 dudes under 50, and it was just stupid. So I
would take a bone dry day, and it would maybe 5, but 10 people.
I don't know if people were
15?
saying that, but people were definitely talking about a lot of dudes sub 15, and it just wasn't going to happen with those high country conditions. But yeah, I mean, similar years. I think after all is said and done, I think the biggest factor was the participants. I think in 2019 that was genuinely. I think 2019 was the equivalent of the 2021 women's year, where it's like, fuck the conditions. These are 10 people who came to play.
And really, there were like 15 to 20 of us that I think everybody was ready in that group. I mean, there was a huge pack of runners that were being smart early, hiking everything early, and we all virtually had a great Cal Street. Probably the 5 of us, if you include yourself, Ian, Jeff, Kyle. I think all of us had a fantastic Cal Street, don't you?
Yeah, I just love it. The general takeaway from everyone who was in roughly our position that year was just nobody came back. Like, everyone felt like they were hammering from Forest Hill to the finish, and nobody came back. But I also just love to toot my own horn. I just love the statistic that, like, outside of the top 10, like your number 11 through 15 that year were Ryan Sands, Kris Mocco, me, Tyler Green, and I think Sharman might be the other one.
Sharman was 15th, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, how is that 11 through 15 rather than, like, I don't know, 2 through 7? It just makes no sense.
Agreed. Especially looking now at the historical results that Tyler has had on the course.
Yeah.
And looking at Ian's track record in general, like he ran a race that would have been top 10 so many of the previous editions of the event, So,
dude, this is like, the fact that you and I are still yammering on about 2019, like, we are for sure past our prime.
That we're still
talking about.
You're 2019. Maybe that is the case. When I saw McManus this year at Western States, he's like, "Oh man, you've been 8th here," and I was like, "Yeah, man, like 5 years ago."
Yeah,
that was like 5 years ago, man.
Yeah, dude, back before the war.
Yeah, it does feel just like yesterday. It's funny that it's been 4 years since we raced at that event. Since then, you've had a pretty awesome chance to do a bunch of different events. You ran your first 100K World Championships for Team USA. You're now on the UTMB train. You had a great run there last year at CCC. You were 10th, yeah?
No, I was 13th, first American, and that was 2021.
2021, okay, yeah. And then last year you did World 100Ks.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
So we're approaching your first UTMB, man. Excited to go over there and explore the whole round.
Yeah, man. I'm honestly, I'm approaching it with the same sort of nervous apprehension that I think people ought to use for their first 100-miler. There's a lot of things about UTMB that are not my strength. long sections of hiking, a night start with the majority of the race. Well, not quite, but a huge chunk of the race being overnight in the dark. Um, it's not if it's not on paper a race that suits me. Um, so, I mean, honestly, I feel like this is kind of a test toward the end of this thing that we've been talking about, which is getting away from doing it or having performance be a primary motivator, and trying to do it for, if not just purely for fun, then to have one of the motivations be testing yourself. So I know that a lot about this is going to be really difficult for me in particular, and I'm trying to find some meaning in that angle to it and some satisfaction in that pursuit, rather than like really being worried about being, top 20 or one of the first Americans or anything like that. So it's really hard to do, man. And as much like really slow training as I've been doing and trying to get used to that gear and trying to get used to just finding joy in long days on the trails while running a really, really slow pace, it's another thing to convert that to race day when there's a bunch of people passing you, or even that you're passing, because trying to do it for yourself when there's a bunch of other people around you to compare yourself to is really challenging for guys like us. So
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's really easy to get caught up in the race when you're maybe taking a step towards like this attitude that you're talking about, doing the event less for a squeak every ounce out of the performance and more for I'm going to enjoy the round around the mountain. And I think like what a great attitude to have at your first UTMB too,
mm-hmm.
like to be going into the round with this attitude of I respect the hell out of it and I'm going to finish it.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Primary. I'm not gonna say outright that I'm gonna finish it, but it is the biggest goal, and I'm willing to get 200th place if that means finishing it. Um, so yeah, again, it's really hard to try to take all performance expectations away from it, or rather, it's not that hard to take all performance expectations away from it. It's what's really hard to do is to accept a performance like a 200th or something, but also be there to try to pursue a really strong race. Like I've done training races. I've phoned in races before to get a Western States lottery entry, right? Like I've gone out there and said, I'm going to jog this one start to finish. But what I haven't really done is go out and be like, I'm going to, like, finishing this one is so important, and I think it's going to be so fucking hard that I'm going to have to start out really conservative, and hey man, maybe I just don't end up being able to move up, but I have to be ready to do it if I can. So I don't know. The times I've run that conservative early and aggressive late race, like I've never really had this other consideration, which is like, maybe even if I go out slow, I won't be able to finish hard. So I don't know, man. This one's kind of fucking with me. I think in an ideal world, it just plays out as normal, which is I start easy and finish hard and make up a bunch of places and have a great race and feel good about it. But yeah, I'm having to do a lot of work on the mental space going into this one.
Well, I think it's a really mature approach the way that you're looking at it and respecting it to this degree. I think some of those feelings you've got to let them wash away on race day, but a lot of those feelings I think are going to make you appreciate the round a lot more. So it's exciting, man. I'm excited for you to get the experience to go the whole way around.
You know what the fucked up thing about UTMB is though, is that you just run through the night, you don't get to see anything, and then you just run CCC. So it's like, in terms of bang for your buck, it's a absolute ripoff. Like you just
you miss all these really pretty views.
Yeah, you don't see anything more than you see at CCC, but you're just all tired because you stayed up all night. So I don't know, man. I'm pretty pro CCC,
and I feel like it's the they're thinking about the time of the day that you're going to finish and having the
Oh,
most
dude.
eyes on the time of the day.
Do we want to get into it, man? Like,
Nope. We don't want to get into it. We don't want to get into that part of it. We don't. Someday we'll have a chance maybe to go over there and we'll do the classic round hut to hut, and we'll spend the prettiest hours of the day between the huts, and when the sun sets we'll be at a hut and relaxing, and then we'll wake up the next morning and see the sunrise and just hike our way around it.
yeah,
That would
dude.
be the dream.
Are we wearing clothes during this dream? Anyway,
Let's
here we go.
let's keep it moving. All right, so Kris, you're now working with our coaching collective. We're excited to have you on, and you've got some availability this year. Tell people a little bit about, just in general, like your coaching philosophies, why you do it, why you like to help other people, and we know you've got some availability right now, so we'd love for people to hear about you.
Yeah, so I just moved over from a different coaching service with whom I had a great relationship, but honestly, just, with you starting this a little more formal coaching service and involving some other coaches, yeah, man, I just want to coach with my buddy. So here I am. I got a few spots available. My kind of specialty is definitely ultra. I have coached some people to shorter distance stuff, some lifestyle sort of fitness maintenance stuff, men and women, all sorts of terrain. I've coached people from all different corners of the U.S. and even abroad. So, I'm one of those runners who values versatility, and I like people who like to do different things and aren't just hyper focused on one particular discipline. So, I think if I have a coaching philosophy, it's flexibility in that way. So, I've got a background in collegiate and post-collegiate running, and I know what the Lydiard and Daniels methods and stuff look like. But a lot of it, in my opinion, is identifying what type of running you're the most stoked about at any given point, and leaning into that as kind of the most important feature of your training. So a lot of my runners do different stuff, and it's because I try to guide them towards the thing that they're most interested in so that they have the best time doing it. Because if you're stoked about it, then you're going to do it a little harder, and working out a little harder is what makes you better, regardless of whether it's flat or steep or whatever. So try not to turn it into a grind.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it's all about, is keeping things sustainable and continuing to enjoy, the path to individual success. And I'm going to put down in the show notes where Kris's coaching services are available, down in the link in the bio. It's, straight across at patrickreaganrunning.com/coaching. And there's, you can read even more about Kris there. So, all right, Kris, thanks for the main portion of the show. I'm super stoked on the running that we got to chat about. We had a chance to discuss some music early on at the very head of the cast, and now we're really excited to get into, since Kris is going to be a semi-regular guest, we're excited to get into this portion of the show that we're going to talk a little bit about our favorite discographies, or one of our favorite discographies by a different musician, or a musical group that we really like. I've brought to the table a partial discography today in actual LP format over here, and I'm gonna bring them up one by one. But first, since Kris is the guest on the show, I want to give him a chance to shout out to one of his favorite bands and tell us a little bit about the group.
Yeah, dude. So all right. So picture this: I was in Vermont last year, hanging out with Eric LaPuma, and we went to a little pizza restaurant, drank a few beers. Wasn't enough for me. It was enough for LaPuma. He had to go home with his girlfriend Joanna, and go to bed early before the sun went down. And so I decided to go out to some bars. Went to a couple beer bars. Vermont's a great town for that, or rather, Burlington's a great town for that. Vermont's a great state for brewing. So went to a couple bars. Ended up at this little dive bar. It's a Monday night. There's maybe me and two other people in this bar just drinking Narragansett lagers. And the bartender has this music going, and it's just the weirdest shit I've ever heard, but it kind of fucking rules. And
which is saying a lot for you, man. Which is saying a lot for you. You like,
dude. And this bartender was super cool looking, and I'd had a bunch of beers, and I just was really digging this music. And so I asked, like, what in the fuck is this? Because it was so strange but so cool. And turns out it was the Viagra Boys. And
Oh yeah.
I've been super into these guys since then. They are a Swedish. I think they're technically lumped into the post-punk genre, but that kind of means different things if you, depending on whether you're talking about the 20 teens or the early or late 80s. Yeah, post-punk. It's more of a what it isn't than what it is. But these guys, the way I kind of think of them is they come out of the sort of the Swedish like early 2000s punk movement. So we're talking Refused, we're talking the International Noise Conspiracy, even
Yeah.
bands that aren't quite as punk like the Hives. But there's this sound that was coming out of Sweden and pop punk and post punk.
And I feel like a lot of it was the Refused, man.
The Refused is definitely the key to that whole scene. But the Viagra Boy, it did not surprise. I could have called Sweden without even finding out that they were from Sweden. So that's definitely the vibe. But these guys, it's kind of like if the Refused had a little brother who like did a lot of meth. So it's like it's kind of weird stuff, and it's weird and kind of sardonic, and but anyway, yeah, the music's super cool. The kind of weird origin stories, these guys had a post-punk band started up, but they didn't have a singer. And they're out at karaoke one night, and this just like super tatted up dude with like a face tat, looks all fucked up, is doing karaoke, and he's singing Mariah Carey. And they're like, dude, this guy's a legend. And it turns out he's American. So this Swedish punk band goes up and asks this tattooed dude singing Mariah Carey to be the singer in their band, and the rest is history.
Whoa.
And these guys rule. So their whole discography is awesome.
Yeah. So take us through it. Like, where do you start in the discography?
Yeah, I'll just give you a couple things. I mean, they're pretty new. They started in 2015, so like there hasn't been a huge arc to the sound yet. It's all like you put on Viagra Boys on Spotify or Pandora or whatever, like you'll get the picture pretty quickly. But the place that I would start, two songs I would start with. Sports is probably their goofiest and I think kind of best entry point. So listen to the song Sports, listen to the song Punk Rock Loser, and then go on YouTube and type in Viagra Boys Shrimp Sessions. And it's about a 40-minute long set in a little like warehouse setting. And they just rule. You can capture a lot of the energy of these guys by watching them play in this super strange environment. So yeah, man, they're kind of hypnotic, and I've been really into them lately.
All right, awesome. This is probably my favorite portion of the shows so far. All right, I'm gonna bring back an oldie but a goodie here, and this is probably a little bit more accessible to most people. But Kris, I've got a treat today. Some visual gold here. Maybe one of your favorites growing up, maybe not. But I've got the discography of Alkaline Trio.
Yeah, baby.
Starting with the album, God Damn It. Mike Park at Asian Man Records has always put out these initial albums. I believe these are like right around the same time as AFI's Nitro Years. And this album is banger after banger after banger. One of my favorite 3-piece acts ever. I would say that Yob is up there now with another of my favorite like 3-piece bands of all time. But I think that if you're looking for something like melodic punk rock, like relatively dark, with a very similar feel to like AFI a little bit later in their career, and also two vocalists, which I think is a fascinating part about Alkaline Trio. Dan Adriano and Matt Skiba go back and forth with the vocals. Super solid drummer. This is one of my favorite albums, this Alkaline Trio, God Damn It. Probably my second favorite album is maybe I'll Catch Fire, which is banger after banger as well. Maybe their best album, From Here to Infirmary. and Good Morning, which is probably the darkest album they recorded up to that point. That was like at the absolute explosion of punk rock music, like with the Warped Tour, and the era that we grew up in, Kris, like right around the time period that everybody was signing for big money with major labels, and Alkaline Trio signed, I believe, with Vagrant on that record, and From Here to Infirmary, and those records are just incredible. Probably four of my favorite 50 records, all by the same band. So,
dude, I was gonna bring up the Warped Tour. That those guys are an absolute iconic Warped Tour band, which is
for sure,
a silly thing to say, but yeah, dude, I've one of the I was that particular corner of pop punk in that era, in like the late 90s to early 2000s. That was one of the that was a corner that I was kind of against, or not interested in, or even to the point of kind of making fun of it and calling it emo, which to some extent it is.
yeah,
But
to some
I
extent, a lot of
I
punk rock, pop punk, emo-ish.
yeah, I was more in the school of bands like NoFX and Bad Religion, these bands that kind of fancied themselves more connected to actual old school punk, which, let's face it, they're not any more connected to, mid 70s punk than Alkaline Trio is. But nonetheless, like, emo was a dirty word to me as an early teenager going to the Warped Tour. And it's only been recently in the last few years that I've finally come around to realizing that, like, holy shit, AFI fucking rules. And so does
Rules.
the Alkaline Trio. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
dude,
I'll
great
tell you
pick.
what, if you if you go back to a time period when you think about like, oh, bands that were selling out and changing their sound, and maybe one of the classic examples that people talk about is like Jawbreaker not playing the Gilman anymore because they came out with Dear You and they had all these layered guitar parts, right? And if you go back now, though, I think, and you listen to an album like Jawbreaker's Dear You, or AFI's Sing the Sorrow, dude,
Yeah.
every single song is like incredible, unbelievable. And I don't even know if it's that, like, it was just the stigma with punk rock bands making money or something like that. But I think that some of the albums that came out during that time were so polished and sound just so good now. And Good Morning is one of them. That's one of the albums I think people say, Alkaline Trio has changed it a lot. But in reality, it's a bit of a bummer they moved on from Asian Man Records at that time. Like Mike Parks, like, put out great records for so many independent bands for such a long time, including the Vandals, who have always been with him. But those records are nuts, man. So.
Sweet, dude.
All right. Well,
Love
that's
it.
my piece for the day, man. I like this. I like this little the finishing touches we put on this one with discography of our choice, or a band that we thought people should listen to. Mine is obviously a lot less obscure and very accessible, but I'm going to be sure to check out the Viagra Boys.
I don't know, man. I don't think we're as in touch with what the kids are listening to as we used to be. I feel like an
Mhm.
old reference of Alkaline Trio might go over the heads of some people who are actively listening to the Viagra Boys these days. So,
Yeah. So maybe we'll turn them on to
yeah,
a new group. There we
yeah,
go.
catch the
Okay.
youths.
Well, Kris, thanks a lot for the call, man, and really looking forward to the next time we get to do this. This was episode number 5, and I'll look forward to maybe episode 10. We'll do another one of these.
Sick. Good to see you, buddy.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks for stopping in to hang out with me and Kris Brown. I really enjoyed our call today. Kris is going to be one of the most regular guests on the Ultrawizard Ramble podcast, and it was cool going down memory lane a bit and talking about what's up next for Kris. Around the release of this podcast, Kris will be probably running UTMB or about to do his first round around the entire mountain, passing through, Italy, heading over to Switzerland and back to Chamonix, France. So from the Ultrawizard Ramble podcast and Kris's coaching team, we want to wish him the best of luck over there and a great race. For more about Kris, including the coaching services that he offers, I'm going to put a link down in the bio. We have a little collective, the Ultrawizard, Ramble, like coaching services, etc. And you can find more out about Kris at the website below. Thanks for coming along for the ride today, and we enjoyed having you.